Okay, so that should be on. Hello, yep. What's that? Pointed at it. You can manually zoom out. That's just these two. Out, in. Got it? Some point. Anyway, we're right to. Oh no. What's that? All right. Welcome everyone. Glad that you can come along and be a part of tonight. Tonight is a candidates forum for the Flint electorate. I'm hosted here at the Uniting Church on behalf of all the churches here at Emerald and surrounding region. And so welcome to everyone. It's great that you could be here. Now, if in case of an emergency, out the back doors, out to the footpath, needs a toilet, then that's just over there. And so make sure that your mobile phones have them switched silent, so you can have them. In fact, it'd be good to have them in case a question comes to mind, but we'd have them silent. That's about all for that. So without further ado, I will introduce our two candidates that we've got with us tonight. We've got Senator Malcolm Roberts, so not technically a candidate, but Senator Malcolm Roberts on behalf of One Nation. And we also have Lance Price, who's from the People's First Party. Jared Rennick's party, yeah. Oh, so you are a candidate. You're a candidate for the Senate. Yes, there you go. I stand corrected. One Nation. So Malcolm Roberts is One Nation, and Lance Price is from People's First Party. Yeah. And so the way that tonight is going to run, oh yeah, the names are up there, is that we're going to give each of the candidates a time to do an introductory speech, so they can introduce what they're on about and what they would like to say, try and convince you that they should get your vote. But then we've got 5 set questions, and these questions have come from the Queensland Churches Together, and they've put together these 5 questions. So there's a video that goes along with each of those questions, and then the question. And so that's what we'll have next. And then following that, we'll have questions from the floor. And the preferred way that we'd like to do the questions from the floor is to use an app called, a website called Slido. And so what you do is you go to slido.com, and when you get to the page, you'll see the joining as a participant, and you enter the code 1470535. That allows you to go there. Obviously, you can just go to the website by using the QR code as well. And then you'll be able to write your question. And I will have to get my laptop, but then I will receive those questions on my laptop. And then if there's sort of similar questions, I'll put them together to be one question, so we're not asking a whole lot of similar questions. And so that's what we'll do with that. If you do not have a phone, don't know how to use a phone, or you're not confident with this technology, there is just pens up the back there, and there's paper under my laptop. There's paper over there as well, and so you can just write out a question using pencil and paper, and then hand it up to me if you've got one of those. I've got that. So that is how tonight is going to work. So without further ado, we're not going there. Without further ado, we'll ask who wants to go first. Rock, paper, scissors, or... Oh, there we go. All right, there we go. Beautiful.
Do I need a microphone or can people hear?
Well, if you come up here, you'll have a microphone, or you can just grab that microphone there. So either of those 2 microphones will work.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for this opportunity. My name's Lance Price. I'll speech in 3 stages: who I am, why I'm here, and what I have to do. So, first of all, I was born in Monto, so I was born in Fling. My dad was a returned serviceman from New Guinea, and my mum a lifetime teacher. We grew up a working family, farming, bulldozing, and I used to sit on front steps and watch the people go past down to the sawmills, down to the butter factory, down to the rail, the grain silos, and the local councils. And that was my upbringing. I never thought it would change. After school, I got into construction and more earthworks and did Cania Dam, and then went up and developed Hamilton Island. There, my brother and I went out west and did big power lines out in the desert and that kind of thing out in the bush, meeting great people. Came back, went contracting on my own, and then we had Paul Keating, and we had the recession that we all needed to have to bring us into line, and I lost everything I had. I went over to Gladstone and got a job at the smelter and did 15 years there, worked my way up from operator to superintendent, transferred within, then it was Comalco, to Weipa, where I got back onto digging dirt. and ended up superintendent of production at Weipa bauxite mine, and went on to become the manager for Aboriginal Employment and Development, for which I was lucky enough to get the 2007 Reconciliation Award and the Prime Minister's Excellence Award for the training packages we put together in the inclusion programs. We came down from Weipa to Emerald. We bought over in Five Leighton Drive and lived there for 15 years. So my son Jacob still lives here, worked around all the coal mines in gas at Gladstone and West Australia, and back into coal. I was a senior specialist for coal mine development with BHP, doing creek diversions and things like that. And we had a parting of the ways when you had to have 2 jabs to come to work, and I declined, and so I went to work for Glencore, who didn't take that policy on. At the same time, my daughter was a police officer here in Emerald, and she loved the job. She was on maternity leave, just had my little grandson then, and she was charged by QPS for failure to follow a police directive and stood down. That went on for 2 years, but the charge sheet was inaccurate because charging officer, they just had commissioner, and the charges weren't valid, but the only person really that stood up and financed their claim was Clive Palmer, so another freedom fighter in his own way. And so we appreciate that. But my daughter left, they've gone to New South Wales and they're still in mining, and I've got another little grandchild from that. And we've tried to retire to Baffle Creek, where we're trying to create a little enclave, if you like, where there's a safe place for my family, the people I love. We can supply and grow our own food, and try and protect ourselves from what may well come along. So that's who I am. Why I'm here, I was driving home. I still do SSE at a quarry between Banana and Theodore, and I was listening on the radio, and I listened to Gerard Rennick. I'd followed him a lot and followed his work in the question time and Senate estimates and that type of stuff. I was very, very impressed. And on the interview, he said he's trying to put together candidates to have a party to run in this election. And I picked up the phone, registered myself, and within half an hour, Gerard was back on the phone, and here I am, I suppose. Very much not a politician, but I thought to myself, if not me, then who? Because nobody else put their hand up, and if not now, then when? Because going forward, we don't have a bright future if we don't change our direction. So our hope is to become the major Freedom Party, if you like, and that's my goal, and that's what I'm asking people to vote for. Thank you.
I record everything I say in public. Who knows what someone misinterpret. Well, first of all, thank you to Greg for the introduction and for the organisation. Thank you to the Churches of Emerald. Can you hear me? Thank you to the Churches of Emerald. And thank you all for being here. Thank you for being awake and for supporting active democracy. I used to live in Emerald from 1990 to 1993 with my wife. My wife actually is an American. She's a dual citizen now. And she came from a city of 7 million people in Chicago in 1990 to 7,000 in Emerald, and she loved it. We had our first child here, a son, Shane, at the Emerald Hospital. We've got very fond memories of Emerald, very fond memories. As a senator, I'm free to speak the truth and advance policies that meet the needs of the Australian people. After 7 years of listening across Queensland and Australia, and with parliamentary experience and resources, One Nation developed a suite of policies that will get young people into their own home, that will reduce the cost of groceries, petrol, electricity, insurance, housing and travel, and that will restore abundance and opportunity to all Australians. Let me ask you a question. Who knows better how to spend your money? Bureaucrats or you? Mary knows straight away. One Nation believes very strongly that you do. One Nation policy has 4 connected platforms. They're all connected. First platform is putting $40 billion of your money back in your pocket every year. How? Through saving $90 billion of federal waste and duplication. No one even batted an eyelid. You know that 90 billion is correct. These have all been costed. Plus, investing $20 billion annually in infrastructure to increase Australia's productive capacity, putting more money in your children's future pockets. The last $30 billion is paying down extra $30 billion a year off the record Liberal Labor debt, which is almost $1 trillion. All of our policies, as I said, are costed. So firstly, putting more money back in your pocket. First item, income splitting via joint tax return filing for families with a dependent child. That'll put $9,500 a year back into the pockets of families of breadwinners on the average income. $9,500 a year. Next one, halving petrol and diesel excise tax, cutting fuel prices 26 cents a litre. By the way, these policies are so good that both the majors have copied some of them, or bits of them, and 3 of the minors have copied some of them. And that one is Dutton actually got it from us. Next one, cutting electricity bills 20% immediately. And I'm happy to explain this in Q&A. All these are costed and justified. And in 3 years, reductions of 50% in electricity prices thanks to new coal-fired power stations. Next one, abolish alcohol excise tax on beer and spirits served in hospitality venues to revive the hospitality industry and community social events. Cutting the fuel and electricity prices reduces every business's input costs, leading to higher productivity, lower inflation, cutting the CPI, lowering interest rates, and reducing house loan payments, and reducing grocery and food prices. We will also allow pensioners to earn more without penalty. We will raise self-funded retirees' tax thresholds so people who've worked hard all their lives can earn up to $35,000 with no penalty. We will remove GST from insurance, general and rural. Insurance prices are killing people at the moment. We will fund the ACCC, the Competition and Consumer Commission, to investigate illegal behaviour from Coles and Woolies, from insurance companies and airlines. Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers cut $10 million off their budget, the ACCC's budget, at a time when prices are rampant. So we will bring that back and add more. Increase Medicare rebate $3 billion a year to promote bulk billing and crack down on Medicare and PBS fraud. As I said, all these are costed. Next, the spending reform. No one else is talking about spending reform, but you know it's being wasted. You're paying through the nose through tax. We will shrink the government to fit the Constitution. It's got out of hand, eliminating $90 billion of waste and duplication. First item. We will shut the Department of Climate Change and Energy and related agencies, departments, programs, schemes, regulations, rules, saving more than $30 billion in waste, plus increasing the efficiency right throughout the economy by freeing up the economy. Plus, it'll save $3 billion a year on taxpayers because the government's electricity bill itself will come down $3 billion. We'll end UN net zero. We will withdraw from the UN Paris Agreement. We will tax gas exports to force the world's biggest tax evaders to pay Australia $13 billion in tax. We will eliminate federal departments that are duplicating state responsibilities. If you have a look at the Constitution, it lists some of the functions of government. Most of them are in the hands of the state government, but the federal government's taken them over, and both are now doing it, which is causing a lot of waste. Next, we will eliminate waste across the Aboriginal industry, saving $15 billion a year. This is not just a saving measure, this is about improving the care for Aboriginals, because at the moment we've got so many activists, consultants, lawyers, academics and bureaucrats all fiddling with it, and the money is being wasted between the taxpayer and the Aboriginal communities. It doesn't get to the Aboriginal communities. We'll replace all those parasites with direct community grants and real jobs for real care. We've seen the Aboriginals, they want, I've been to every Aboriginal community on Cape York 3 times, and they want autonomy. That's the only way to get accountability, giving people the authority. That's real care. We'll return the NDIS to providing reasonable and necessary support, saving $20 billion rotting and waste. We'll abolish the federal education and housing departments. Let it go back to the states where it belongs in the Constitution. We'll abolish the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, and make it responsible to Parliament again, which is where it should be. We'll withdraw from the United Nations and the UN World Health Organization. I first mentioned that in 2016 in my first speech in the Parliament. Now it's part of One Nation policy to get out of the UN. We'll address the housing catastrophe by working on demand, supply, building prices and inflation to reduce mortgage payments and rents. For a start, deport 75,000 people who are here illegally. Deport them. Next, we'll stop mass immigration. Each year, as 220,000 people leave, allow only 130,000 skilled people to enter. That's net negative migration. Net negative migration. We have got people homeless, sleeping in tents, cars, caravans, and I'm talking about working families, mums and dads coming home to their car, seeing if their kids are still there. Where do they go to the toilet? Where do they go to a shower? Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, Rockhampton, Gladstone, Bundaberg, Maryborough, Gympie, Ipswich, North Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, Beaudesert. People sleeping homeless. Our capital city has got homeless people living under bridges, working families. These are good people. And the cause of it is rampant immigration, which I can get onto in Q&A. We'll reduce foreign students and cut their Ponzi scheme. We've got about 600,000 foreign students, international students here in the country. There are beds for 100,000. Where do they go? They go into the market that you're in. So, and what they're doing is they're repatriating about $10 to $11 billion a year back home. They're here to be cheap labour. That's what they're here for. And they're taking up beds, taking up roofs, and they're taking up jobs. We'll ban foreign ownership of real estate and farms, just as New Zealand and Canada have recently done. We'll replace the government's failed Housing Future Fund, which has not built any houses, with a people's mortgage, a loan with a term up to 30 years, 5% fixed interest rate, and that can incorporate the HECS loans. That frees up people to enter the housing market at an earlier stage. We will continue to pursue COVID fraud to get compensation for lockdowns, restrictions, and COVID injuries, COVID injection injuries. They're hideous. There are thousands of people dead from these things. There are thousands of people who are crippled for life. We'll get treatment for the vaccine injured. We will stop the shots. We will restore personal and medical freedoms, which have been abused. More details at onenation.org.au, onenation.org.au. One Nation will shrink the federal government to fit the Constitution, grow Australia's productive capacity to create wealth and abundance for all, reduce debt to lower budget interest payments, and take wasted money from government to put more money back in your pockets. One Nation believes and values a social security safety net that helps those who can't help themselves, and a government that uses its power for good, not evil. We will protect Australians from rapacious global corporations. For this to happen, we only need one thing: your number one vote. Thank you.
Is that, there we go. Right, now before we get to the questions and answers, I just got so when I sent out the invitation, a number of the candidates sent me a prepared thing that they had, a prepared sheet for me to read out, and so I agreed that I would read them out, so we'll do that first. Now, Colin Boyce was down to be here tonight, but I received this letter, this email, around midday today, saying, unfortunately, due to last-minute change in Mr. Boyce's campaign schedule, he has had to depart the Central Highlands region unexpectedly this morning. Will therefore be unable to attend tonight's candidate forum. While we were aware there was a risk of a change, Mr. Boyce's diary had been specifically arranged to prioritise this event, and he is genuinely disappointed that he is no longer able to attend. Please accept and kindly pass on his sincere apologies to organisers and attendees. And constituents are welcome to contact our office via phone or email should they have any questions or concerns that we can assist with. So that comes from Colin. The two candidates that I have prepared statements from, the first is from Family First, and so this is what the Family First candidate sent. Strong families form the fundamental building blocks of local communities which strengthen towns, cities and regions. Family First stands for policies that will help build up families rather than tear them down. Family First believes human life begins at conception and should be protected from that moment until natural death. Australian women deserve support, care and choices to carry and raise their children, and will work to create an Australia where every mother and baby receive gold-plated support, and abortion becomes unthinkable. Children are our future and must be protected. Modern gender ideologies are being forced upon vulnerable children, causing great harm. Family First supports restoring the true definition of male and female, restoring the meaning of woman, in the Sex Discrimination Act, and keeping biological males out of women's sport and spaces. Family First stands with parents being able to choose the education of their children. Christian schools are under attack by progressive activists, resulting in Christian parents having to fight to educate their children according to their faith. We need to prevent the recommendations of the recommendations of the ALRC, which is the Australian Law Reform Commission, from being implemented, and seek to repeal relevant provisions in anti-discrimination law. The number one issue for the upcoming election is the cost of living crisis. This is a crisis that we all feel. We feel it via housing affordability, we feel it at the grocery store, we feel it at the petrol pump, and we especially feel it in our electricity bills. This is a crisis that was caused by the major parties. For a country to remain prosperous, it requires cheap, reliable, clean and secure energy. Australia should be leading the world in this area. We have coal, gas, oil and uranium in abundance. We are so energy resource rich, and yet successive government policies stop us from utilising these resources ourselves, instead opting for foreign-provided expensive and unreliable renewables. Family First believes Australian resources should be used by and for Australians. The virtue signalling obsession with renewables will bankrupt the country, destroying our security and environment along with it. We simply cannot afford to let that happen. Australians deserve affordable electricity, not empty promises and higher bills. It's time to end the renewable rort and put families first. So that's from the Family First party. And this is from Peter Zunker, who is from the Trumpet of Patriots party. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the at the Candidates Forum. I would dearly like to attend in person, but Flynn is such a large electorate. Below I outline key party policies, issues relevant to Flynn and my personal pledge. Australian values. Our values, way of life and Aussie spirit are being eroded. We stand for one population under one Australian flag, having multiple flags divides the country, a multiracial country with one culture, the Australian culture. No need to be welcomed to your own country. People from multiple nations, cultures and backgrounds have helped build Australia and made important contributions. And protecting freedom of speech and the right to hold differing opinions. School values. For too long, our school system has pushed far left woke ideology. We propose to remove the woke agenda from schools, stop trashing Australian history and the roles of our forefathers, focus schools on reading, writing and arithmetic, not ideology, protect the rights of parents as the primary caregivers for their children. Issues relevant to Flynn. Promises are being made and not delivered to the people of Flynn. New promises are made before old ones are fulfilled. The federal government, regardless of who is in power, must complete what has been committed to. Funds have been allocated to key projects, including Beef Corridor Road Infrastructure Project, Central Queensland Hydrogen Hub, Alpha High Purity Alumina Facility, Paradise Dam Restoration Project. Where are these projects at, and will they be finished? What has happened to the taxpayer funds already spent? I will seek answers to these questions rather than make new promises when existing projects remain incomplete. I want to ensure taxpayers get what they paid for. And finally, my personal pledge. I am not a career politician, nor am I doing this for personal gain. If elected, I pledge to retain 60,000 of the annual parliamentary salary and donate the balance to the Royal Flying Doctor Service, honouring both the people of Flynn and the man for whom our electorate is named. And this pledge would result in over $500,000 donated to the RFDS over a 4-year term of Parliament. While small in the big picture, it's an election promise I know I can deliver. I am driven by a desire to stop the political duopoly from ignoring the needs of everyday Australians, especially in regional and rural communities like ours. Okay, so that's the prepared messages that I got from a couple of the candidates who sent them to me. All right, well, without further ado, that now does bring us to the part where we will have the questions, the video questions, and then the question will also then be up on the screen for you and for both of you to then answer. So you can choose to do so here or up there when it comes your time to answer the question. So.
Religious freedom isn't just about what we believe in the privacy of our own homes. It's about the right to express those beliefs, to speak openly, to practice freely, and even to hold and express views that are unpopular. It also means not being forced to say or do things that are against our faith. And this isn't just a nice idea, it's a human right protected under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which states that every person has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, including the freedom to worship, practice, and even teach our beliefs, whether in public or in private, by ourselves or as a group. It also says that every parent has the right to teach what they believe to their children and have them educated in their faith. Australia is a signatory to this international covenant, and it is legislated as one of the 7 core international human rights treaties that Australia has adopted. Despite this, we have no national laws that protect religious freedom. Instead, we rely on a patchwork of laws that usually mention religion as an afterthought and often as an exemption rather than as a positive right. Right now, religious freedom is under great pressure. Beliefs that have been consistently taught for thousands of years are starting to be defined as harmful or bigoted, and laws are being enacted that restrict these teachings in the name of inclusiveness and protecting people from harm. For example, proposals for vilification legislation have been drafted with a new subjective test where the mere expression of a religious belief could be punished if a person from a protected group might consider it harmful. In Victoria, laws have been made that make certain prayers illegal, and a government commission has a website listing what prayers are acceptable and what ones are not. Those laws could see parents punished for simply encouraging their child to follow religious teachings on gender and sexuality. Companies have followed the example of our governments, and people have lost their jobs or been punished at work for expressing their beliefs, or even simply because of what church they went to. Trying to silence religious beliefs does not create a more inclusive society. Instead, it creates one that excludes people of faith. Australia needs a government that understands the importance of religious freedom and protects the rights for all people to respectfully debate and disagree on these most fundamental issues. Will you protect the individual rights of religious freedom, expression, and conscience, and the right for parents to raise and educate their children in accordance with their faith?
Yeah. So how will you protect the individual rights of religious freedom, expression and conscience, and the right for parents to raise and educate their children in accordance with their faith? You can go first if you want, Lance, seeing you're sitting there.
Very noisy. Okay, yeah, when I went to school, we said the Lord's Prayer before we started, and it gave us time to reflect, calm, get the thought of football or whatever we're doing in the playground out of our head, and allow us to focus on what we were doing. And that was a state school, not any other sort of school. And these values have been gradually and deliberately under attack for the last 40 years. It's gradually gone out. We've seen a change that's been so underhand, it's been hard to pick the day the change occurred. The International Covenant has said on civil rights and political rights, which protects freedom of thought, conscience and religious, including the right to life, freedom of religion, freedom of speech and fair trial, under which individuals have the right to hold any religion or belief and to manifest it in public and in privacy. Australia signed the ICCPR in 1972 and then we ratified it in 1980. However, we failed to incorporate it into domestic law. So yes is my answer, and I commit to doing all that I can to have the ICCPR adopted into the Australian law, which I will advocate for. By understanding the legal framework, which is something we all have to do, I certainly had it slip away without me noticing it, really. So we need to understand it, engaging in respectful dialogue and advocating for inclusive policies. We can contribute to a society where religious freedom, conscience, expression and parental rights in education are protected and respected.
Thank you, Greg. I watched the videos last night and prepared answers. So in answer to that question, yes, I will continue to protect the individual rights of religious freedom, expression and conscience. I've been doing that in the Senate already for about 7 years. And yes, I will protect the individual rights of religious freedom, expression and conscience, and the right for parents to raise and educate their children in accordance with their faith. That is fundamental. Fundamental. I will continue to do what we, Pauline and I, have been doing to protect freedoms. Pauline Hanson and I moved a motion to have a referral by a Senate committee to develop the process for putting a referendum to the people to incorporate and enshrine freedom of speech in our Constitution. Labor Party, many Liberals, Greens voted against it. But we'll keep going on that one. We will continue to oppose woke policies, transgenderism. There's no one who stood up more than I have in that parliament to oppose this. It's just mutilation of children. Oppose the welcome to country, end the welcome to country, stop the welcome to country. We don't need to be welcome to our own country, especially on Anzac Day. People who fought for our country are welcome to their own country. Come on. Pauline and I were the first cabs out off the rank in opposing the Voice Treaty, the Voice referendum. We're opposing DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion. We oppose abortion up to term, oppose it completely and will remove it back. We also have sponsored and supported the Babies Born Alive bill. I don't know if people are realising our society is disintegrating because now we have abortion in Queensland up to term, and if a child survives the abortion and is alive and intact, he or she is thrown in a cold stainless steel kidney dish and left to die. That's our society. We're working to protect, to restore our society. The Constitution already protects freedom of religion, Section 116. We want to repeal, and we will repeal, Section 18C of the Constitution, Section 18C of the, got the name of the Act, 18C of the Racial Discrimination Act, making it unlawful to offend, insult, humiliate or intimidate. How ridiculous is that? I mean, you can call me a name, but you cannot give offence to me. I can only take offence. The offence comes from within. Yet that's the way our society is operating now. We will abolish, as I said in my speech, the Federal Education Department. That's where the wokeness is going through and the indoctrination is going through our children, through the national curriculum. We will abolish the Federal Education Department. And we'll continue, as I said in my speech, COVID work. But I want to make it very, very clear that the churches need to stop relying upon the UN and following these woke practices and instead rely on Christian teachings. Now, I'm not going to tell Greg how to teach Christianity, but I know that Christ gave us Western civilization, he gave us truth, he gave us freedom, he gave us individual responsibility, he gave us forgiveness. Enormously powerful tools. They have been suppressed, and from what I can see, Greg, and with due respect to you, you wouldn't be holding this conference, this forum, if you didn't want to make changes. But the churches are complicit in allowing a lot of our society to collapse because the churches are not standing up. I'm looking at you, but I'm not pointing to you, if you know what I mean. So it's very important because under our Constitution, the very first paragraph of our Constitution includes these words: humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God. That is clearly a Christian context. We are a Christian country based on Christian principles. I've argued with the Greens on that in the Senate. We are a Christian country. We can't force everyone to be Christians because that would not be Christian to do that. We want to let people come to that realization themselves. But we can restore Christian principles which are in our Constitution's bedrock. And the churches have been slow, have let that go with due respect. And we need to get the churches more active in our society and churches more active through their congregations in our society, getting more involved in politics. I hope that's answered the question.
I think so. All right. You might, come and sit down for the next one, but we'll swap who goes first for this next one. This one is also a bit of a longer one, so you might want to come and sit down.
Freedom of religion doesn't just include individual religious belief and practice. It protects our ability to worship and live out our faith together as a group. This means religious communities must have the freedom to gather, worship, teach, and serve. This is part of freedom of association, the right to gather together with people who share the same beliefs as you. Part of this right is the ability to create institutions based on faith, churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples, so people can gather and worship together. But faith isn't just about worship. We also need to build schools so we can educate our children in line with our faith, and charities so we can live out our faith by caring for others. Australia has a rich history of being blessed by faith-based institutions. Many of our largest charities, hospitals, shelters, aged care and aid, were founded as expressions of faith and still operate today because of their faith identity. Equally, the very first schools in Australia were founded by the church, and today 1 in 3 parents choose to send their child to a faith-based school, and that number is growing. These institutions serve all Australians, regardless of background, but they fundamentally remain religious organisations, built on faith, guided by faith, and successful because of our faith. But all this has been put under threat by governments and legislation that are trying to force religious organisations to compromise on their beliefs or prevent them from running their institutions according to their convictions. One of the most serious areas of pressure is employment and appointment of volunteers. At both state and federal level, laws have been introduced or proposed that would prevent faith-based organisations from preferencing employees who share and live out that organisation's faith. Our institutions are about our people. To be a faith-based school or charity, we need people who not only say they believe our faith, but who live it out in everything they do. Faith-based charities are not just service providers. They're mission-driven organisations that serve others because of their faith. Schools and colleges don't just teach curriculum, they help to shape and form students' characters in a set of values and beliefs. And Australians are increasingly choosing to send their children to schools who form their students based on faith. And school staff, executives and teachers and support staff are the people who set that culture. Australia is greatly blessed by our faith-based institutions, educational, charities and places of worship. But none of this can happen unless they can choose to employ people who uphold and live out their faith. So, will you protect the right of faith-based organisations, including charities and educational institutions, to operate according to their faith? This includes employing staff and engaging volunteers who believe and practice their faith.
So, how will you protect the right of faith-based organisations, including charities and education institutions, to operate according to their faith? This includes employing staff and engaging volunteers who believe and practice their faith. Malcolm.
Thank you. When I was General Manager of Australia's largest underground coal mine just down the road, back in the 1990s, I didn't have a child. As I said, our first son was born here in Emerald. So I wasn't interested in schools. I was pretty busy with the job anyway. But someone told me that they're not Catholics. They weren't Catholics, but they sent their children to a Catholic school. I said, why do you do that? I wasn't being critical. I just said, why? And Michael told me. He said, because they have higher standards of discipline and orderliness. So I recognised that. But I'm hearing that that is not as strong as it used to be in the Catholic schools because of these kinds of things. So in answer to your question, unequivocally, yes. I will protect the right of faith-based organisations, including charities and educational institutions, to operate according to their faith. This includes employing staff and engaging volunteers who believe and practice their faith. I've already supported this in the Senate. I believe that you should hire who you want, and according to your employer's specified needs, objective recruiting. That's what we did with that mine down the road. We had the best workforce in the country. Objective, behaviour-based recruiting. These are the qualities we want. These are the skills. These are the experiences. These are the education. And these are the attitudes we want. And you must have that authority to do that as a church. You must. Same with other charities. You've got to align people. At the moment, there are people in central Queensland and the Hunter Valley working in the coal industry that are owed tens of thousands of dollars per year of service because of an illegal scam that has been going on between the CFMEU and the world's largest labour hire firm, Recruit Holdings from Japan. and other labour hire firms. I've been pushing this for 6 years. Both Liberal Party and Labor Party have tried to cover it up. We're now starting to get something. 6 years of hard evidence. So I'm familiar with industrial relations and workplace relations. What we want to do is reform some of those practices, because at the moment workers are vulnerable to industrial relations practices from union bosses and some employers. Workers are no longer being protected under the scheme that Labor introduced in the Fair Work Act. Not at all. We want to see significant changes to that so that workers are protected. That is fundamental. Workers have to be protected. But you also, as an employer and as an organiser of volunteers, must have the right to hire or employ whoever you want. Again, I say Christianity, though, has to show it has faith in Christian principles. Free speech, again, repeal 18C. Charities should stop relying upon the UN and instead rely upon Christian teachings. Don't quote the UN. Quote the Christian teachings. Quote the Bible. That's what's needed. Churches need to be proud of Christianity. I see them shrinking from Christianity. I can see if one lady agrees with me strongly. But until the churches stand up, they will keep being steamrolled. And you are being steamrolled. We support everything that's just been said there. Churches need to recognise and ignite their congregations, their members, to oppose the anti-human agenda. It is coming in a concerted effort. The same things are happening in America, in Britain, in Canada, in New Zealand, in Australia. This is a global push across the Western civilization, and people are shrinking from it. And the churches have done a marvellous job in aged care, education, and hospitals, and many, many other areas. But they've become dependent on government funds, and now they've let the government hold them ransom on those things. The churches ran away when people like Lance himself, like Lance's daughter, were vaccine mandated. The churches ran. How can people stand up like that when you've got that toxin coming at you? I mean, so what I'm saying is, we will do our bit. Yes, unequivocally yes, but I'm begging the churches to do their bit.
Lance.
So I support absolute the right of employers, of workers and volunteers to decide whether an employee is aligned with the organisation's values and morals prior to and during employment. It's absolutely a critical right to be able to do that in whatever field you choose. To do this, I pledge to seek advice, particularly from all stakeholders, but religious groups as well. There's some terrible, terrible things being taking place in our big cities and our hospitals. What hospitals are being forced to do that goes against the teaching of the Bible, and with terminations of life, with terminations of full-term babies, which is feticide, legalised by a government and being pushed upon faith-based hospitals and all hospitals. All of it is unacceptable and illegal. Sorry. Yep. We'll have to get the same height, Malcolm. So I pledge to seek consultation with religious groups and with people prior to any law or any act happening. It's unacceptable for governments to dictate what treatment is to be given in faith-based hospitals. It's unacceptable really for governments to give directive on what treatment. It's legal or it's not legal. We need to return the power of hospitals back to the hospital boards where it used to be, where a hospital like Emerald, we could have children born. Now every hospital has a right to finish a child's life, but very few have the right to have the birth. So that's absolutely unacceptable. The Mater Hospital in Melbourne is under great pressure to start performing abortions right up to full term by the government. The government must get out of the boardroom, out of the schoolroom, out of the bedroom, and out of places of worship and faith-based organisations. And I'll concede my lack of experience in public speaking, but I'd just like to say, as good a person as Boise is, this is the 6th term he's asking you people to vote for him. And if you want the same old, you'll get what you've always got if you do what you've always done. So just for all the speak, there's not much change. Unlike Malcolm, I can't talk on what I've done in the Senate because I haven't been there, but I can commit to you what I'll do, and I'll uphold Christian values and family values particularly. So thank you.
For more than 160 years, Anglicare Sydney has been dedicated to serving our community, providing essential support to older Australians, families in crisis, and those struggling with housing and financial insecurity. As the housing crisis deepens and cost of living pressures intensify, financial hardship is affecting more people than ever. Parents are struggling to put food on the table, families are being forced from their homes due to rising rents, and those escaping domestic violence often have nowhere to turn as they start over. Hardship now touches a broad cross-section of society: working Australians, people on income support, retirees, pensioners, First Nations communities, and culturally and linguistically diverse families. For many, this is the first time they've ever needed help. With an election taking place in the midst of a cost of living crisis, we know that voters expect real solutions. So that's why we're asking every candidate a simple but critical question. If elected, what will you do to ease the cost of living pressures on individuals and families, especially those most at risk?
Yeah, so what will you do to ease the cost of living pressures on individuals and families, especially those most at risk? Yeah, Lance. Yeah.
People First Party have clear costed policies to reduce the cost of living for lower income people and families. It's hard to track me around the place on it. So we're going to raise the tax-free threshold from $18,200 currently to $40,000. The big two parties have consistently taxed people into poverty and then turned around and created the rescue package, one of which shows up on TV, the other one doesn't. They're doing that, we're doing that, and it's costed through means testing a lot of the benefits that our top bureaucrats and politicians get on leaving, and that will fund that change. We'd like to get to 45,000, but we just don't have the money for that. But 40,000 is a huge step from 18,200. Reduce the red tape on farmer direct sales to the public. We live in a society where you can buy vapes in a pharmacy, but you can't buy milk and eggs from a farmer. You can't buy... Oh, that was on cue. We can't sell meat to people that want it, and more, because of that red tape, there's only 2 slaughterhouses working in the whole of the South Burnett area. And so even though your local butcher is trying to survive, he's got to buy off a major slaughterhouse to pass on, which drives everybody to buy them from the big 2, the Coles and the Woolies. Since we shifted to the Bundaberg area, and we've got 70 acres and cattle there, we go into town and buy a truckload of capsicums or rock melons or potatoes for $50 to $100 because the major supermarket chains have decided to force the farmer to leave it in the paddock rather than let the price go down. It's absolutely, well, it's criminal and needs to be treated as such. Well, abolish renewable subsidies. I realise it's good, and somebody pulled me up on this today. They get $1,200 back a year as a subsidy for having solar panels on their roof. Well, that's good, but it's not the government's money that they're giving to you. It's the money from somebody that couldn't afford to put solar panels on their house that they're giving you, because they're being charged extra for it. And they're the renters, their grandma and granddad who couldn't afford the $10,000. They're paying top dollar so that you can get a subsidy which isn't the government's to give in the first place. Flexible childcare is also one of our policies. This will empower parents to work flexible times and manage their own childcare. Going back to a time before these great childcare international companies took over and the government subsidised them so that they could go broke and send the money overseas when it chooses, and leaving people like nurses who cannot find childcare on back shifts, or miners, or people who are FIFO. This will empower the parents to spend the money how they choose, managing their own childcare, and create an income often for some older parents or cousins or aunts or whatever, like we used to have. We looked after our own. Voluntary superannuation. The 12 to 15% raked off the top of their pay of these lower income people is when they need it most. This money is far better in the pocket of the struggling family than in the CEO pocket, the pocket of the CEO of $1 trillion super fund, where it sits for 20 to 30 years, unusable by the people until they haven't got the children at home and they have got the place just about paid off. It's obviously not working. Still, the same amount of people are needing a full pension after retirement now as what they were in the 90s, same percentage. Reducing immigration to a sustainable level that benefits Australians and Australians. We must not import dependency, which is what we're doing now. The government turned up its nose at the plight of the white African farmers, and they're still suffering terribly over there. And instead we'll import other people who have problems and dependencies when we have vast areas of land that need farming by competent farmers, which they certainly are. The creation of the Infrastructure Bank. This is one of Gerard's key policies. This bank will use Australian money to build value-adding Australian assets with Australian workers to create a strong and wealthy Australia. This policy will build asset sovereignty, not national generational debt that we're currently building. We used to build dams and rail and have huge forestries, and we were the suppliers, and that created an income. We've sold them off, we've got rid of the harbours, we've got rid of the ports, we've got rid of the airports, and now we're in debt. What I inherited from my parents was a asset-rich sovereign country with a wealth of opportunity and a prosperous front. What I'm going to hand on to my grandchildren is generational debt, a lack of sovereignty, and no ownership of our own assets. The core thing is getting people out working and giving good income, doing wholesome jobs, and reducing house costs through less immigration and changing the law on foreign education, where they're allowed to actually send their rent off overseas and the house is purchased by somebody in another country. Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you, Greg. What will I do to ease the cost of living pressures on individuals and families, especially those most at risk? Implement and push our policies to put more money back in your pockets. That's the basics. I've been through that, so I'm not going to repeat that. What we've already found is that 2 of the major parties have adopted some of these policies, and 3 of the minor parties have adopted some of these policies, including the Freedom or Conservative parties. Liberal Labor has been very vague. We are not vague. What we're saying is that we will deport 75,000 people here illegally immediately. We will stop the rampant immigration. John Howard was the first to bring immigration into the big Australia concept. He doubled immigration in his term. Other prime ministers since then have increased it dramatically. Scott Morrison was up around 250,000 a year. Anthony Albanese said that he would increase immigration until we got back to pre-COVID levels. He increased it to 737,000 people coming into the country in the first 12 months. 750,000 people. Already a housing crisis before he even started bringing them in. Then he said he would reduce the second year. It's higher than the first year. And before COVID, there were 1.9 million people here on short-term resident visas. Now, there are 2.45 million. We've already exceeded what we had before COVID. So, as I said, we will replace 220,000 each year that leave with 130 that come in. But they will be people who will be able to work immediately and who have the skills necessary. Anthony Albanese is bringing in people, he says they're construction workers. It's a lie. 0.6% of the people he brings in have got a building experience, are construction workers. And they're supposed to build houses for the other 99.4. Meanwhile, we've got children, couples sleeping homeless in their cars. Electricity. What Anthony Albanese has done, and by the way, the electricity has been, we used to have the cheapest electricity in the world, bar none. Companies came here and built aluminium smelters because of our cheap coal-fired power in the Hunter and in central Queensland. They're shutting down. We now have amongst the most expensive electricity in the world. And I have been the leader in raising this issue profoundly and repeatedly. The immigration issue, that was raised by myself based upon the research of the young man down the back for the last 3 to 4 years. Finally, it's been recognised that it's a crisis. But Labor and Liberal have come up with vague promises, no numbers. We're the only ones with the hard numbers. But electricity, what they've done to hide the electricity charges, the rampant increase in electricity is to put in place energy relief bills. So you don't feel it. But what happens when they come off? And what about small business and large business employers? They're already feeling it. They don't have that. So you pay through the neck when you go to the supermarket, when you go to the corner store, when you go to the petrol station, because they all use electricity for their fridges and freezers. So that's what we want, the truth to come back in electricity. Why is it possible that the world's best coal in the Hunter Valley and in central Queensland, the world's best coal, we can't use it, but they can send it to China to use? Why is it that when we transport coal from out of the mine mouth into the power station, we sell our electricity for 26 cents a kilowatt hour? And China, when we send it overland, handle it at a port, send it thousands of kilometres over the sea, handle it at a port, put it on rail back in China, they use our coal and they sell it for sell the electricity for 8 cents a kilowatt hour. Less than a third. And why is it that we can't use our coal? We can export more coal to China, Asia, Japan, Korea. We produce 560 million tonnes a year, and the Chinese produce, 4.5 billion tonnes a year. And they want more, but we can't use it. This is insane. we want families to raise children. That's why we've got our income splitting joint tax return filing scheme, which will save families $9,500 a year, more money back in their pocket. We've got to think about families as the bedrock of a country. There are two organisations that are the structure of human civilization: the family and the nation state. Both are being destroyed in this country by outside forces, pushed through our parliament under Labor and Liberal. Lance touched on it a little while ago. That's where the push is coming from. They want to destroy faith-based institutions. What are the prerequisites for communism? Destroy religion, number one. Destroy property rights. Put government in charge. All are happening here in this country. That's what we've got to be awake to. I first started waking people up in the Senate in my maiden speech. We have a war on farming that is destroying farmers' rights to manage their land. John Howard started it. To comply with the UN's Kyoto Protocol for climate, there's no evidence for it. He basically took over, stole farmers' property rights, and gave it to the premiers of Queensland and New South Wales. Farmers now have no control, no longer have control over the use of their land. I could go on for a while, but I'll hold back. But war on farming has to stop because that's driving prices up. Coles and Woolies have record margins this year. Coles and Woolies have record profits this year. They used to be in competition on service and price. They're now collusions because they're both owned in part by BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. So I've been the only one asking questions about those companies in Senate estimates on ACCC, and they don't know what I'm talking about. So are you aware that we have 4 banks that are each owned in controlling interest by BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, First State? No, they're not even aware of those companies. We don't have 4 banks. We have 1 bank with 4 logos, and they're ripping people off. We also have been pushing a People's Bank for years now. A People's Bank just like the original Commonwealth Bank that did so much for this country. We want to reinvigorate the post office network because it's the largest retail outlet in the country, most retail outlets in the country. We want to turn that into a proper People's Bank, just like in Japan, just like in New Zealand. They've proven they work. We want to get back to the original Commonwealth Bank as a People's Bank. So I won't go through my policies again, Greg, but what we'll do in answer to that question is implement and push our policies to put more money back in your pockets.
All right.
Australia is in the middle of a gambling epidemic. The figures show Australians lose per capita more than any other country in the world, a staggering $31.5 billion. In this cost of living election, it's salient to know that families are losing more to gambling than they're spending on their utility bills. More than 2 years ago, the Murphy Parliamentary Inquiry delivered a report to the government recommending, amongst other things, a full ban on gambling advertising. It's a move that polls show 72% of Australians support. So, will you, as a candidate in this federal election, commit to support the implementation of all 31 recommendations of the Murphy Review? We believe it's incredibly important to protect our kids and to protect our community from gambling harm.
Now, I did some, I tried to find out what these 31 recommendations were, to have some idea of what they were myself. I don't know if this is coming through as well, but it was actually harder than what I thought. But the 31 recommendations relate to including a ban on online gambling advertising, stronger consumer protections for licensed online gambling, and a crackdown on illegal gambling websites, and a legislated duty of care. That's some of what I could find out anyway. You might have better access to policies than what I could get. On these 31 recommendations, but starting with you, Malcolm, Will you commit to the implementation of all 31 recommendations of the Murphy Review to protect our kids and community from gambling harm?
Well, Greg, so far I've said yes to everything because of the fact that we've already been doing it. This one, in answer to your question, no, I will not commit to implementing all 31 recommendations of the Murphy Review. We already support a policy of restricting advertising, including banning it during critical TV shows. We will support some of the recommendations. I make it clear that I abhor gambling. I don't gamble. It is a problem. It's a complex problem, not fixed by bureaucracy. The Murphy Review is faulty, simplistic, highly intrusive, costly, and ineffective. The Murphy Report was a parliamentary inquiry into the gambling industry chaired by the late Peter Murphy. Formerly, it was called the Joint Standing Committee on Social Policy and Legal Affairs Inquiry into Online Gambling and its impacts on those experiencing gambling harm. Long title. The report was titled, "You Win Some, You Lose Some." That's what this report was titled. The final report, I'll pick some eyes out of this. The final report made an overarching statement. Gambling, quote, "Gambling advertising is grooming children and young people to gamble and encourages riskier behaviour," unquote. One Nation agrees with this statement. Gambling advertisements have become omnipresent on the media. Yet the recommendations were almost all to do with adult gambling harm and the need for a massive and intrusive digital bureaucracy to trap data on every gambler. They trap your data, looking for patterns of harm and regulate to prevent them. The report boasts about Australia leading a global response to gambling harm. This is not about egos. So the question phrasing all 31 recommendations as being to protect children is a blatant misrepresentation. It is false. Almost none of the recommendations are relevant to children, since children can't gamble. Conditioning children to gamble as soon as they turn 18 is, though, a problem. The report did not specifically deal with that. This big brother approach that the report recommends is contrary to One Nation policy on principle and on effectiveness. It won't be effective, and it goes against the principles of freedom. The more bureaucracy, the less effective the outcome. Look around you and the impact of the federal government. Every major problem in this country has come out of federal Parliament House. Every major problem. Parents have a role to play in teaching their children that the government can't and should not usurp. Having said that, protecting children from gambling is hard when they see the advertising all the time. Now, Liberal Senator, we give credit where credit is due. Liberal Senator Henderson has introduced a bill which updates the Industry Code of Conduct for broadcast and online media to include a new provision. There is an Industry Code of Conduct. Quote, "It requires ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, to be satisfied that no gambling promotional content may be broadcast during the period beginning 1 hour before the commencement of a live sporting event and ending 1 hour after the conclusion of the sporting event." End of quote. One Nation supports this measure, and we support changes to the Online Media Platform Code to prevent gambling advertisements being shown to people under 18. We support the recommendation to properly fund the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare to maintain accurate and timely data on gambling harm, so we have a yardstick of how these measures are working. Gambling companies, if they faced what these recommendations are saying, will simply adjust margins and cut payouts. People who are supposed to be being protected will be harmed even more. The gambling problem is an addiction. That's what it is. It's an addiction, a mental health issue, a societal issue. Churches need to stand up and reach out to addicts, and churches in some instances do a great job in reaching out to drug addicts, alcoholics. But we need to reach out to gamblers as well. We need to address the problem comprehensively, not by putting in place 31 recommendations that lead to bureaucracy, intrusive electronic bureaucracy. That's not the way out of this. There are simpler and more obvious measures, and the code of conduct for the industry leads the way. If they don't tighten it up, then we have to tighten it up with legislation. But no, I won't recommend.
Lance.
People First Party also don't support the whole 31 recommendations. It is a very heavy document to get through, especially when you're on the road in a campaign, but I did manage. Just a couple of interesting points. In 2019, 6.6 billion, and in 2020, 5.8 billion in revenue from gambling was taken by the government. So I'm just asking you, how much do you think they want to get rid of it when they're earning that? It's the fox running the hen house. They've introduced, to make themselves sleep better at night, the National Consumer Protection Framework for Online Gambling, which is a very poor document. It's an administrative control for a very real problem, but they can say they're doing their best. I don't support gambling. I'm not into it myself. I do support, in theory, many of the controls, the 31, but definitely not all. There's some there. Oh, sorry. To implement them would require a whole new level of bureaucracy, as Malcolm said, to implement and manage. My commitment is to advocate for the big hitters to be addressed immediately. There's some good ones in there. They want pulling out, and they just do it. They don't need another committee. They don't need a special minister for it, which is one of the recommendations, to have another minister for gambling. And we need to do them immediately. For example, recommendations 16 and 26, just do it. Just go and do it. They don't need that. It needs to be specific, measurable, attainable, resource and timely, and a benefit, not just another bureaucracy sipping coffee and taking away your money. The very destructive addiction of gambling has been propagated for income by the two major parties for the 40-odd years. When I was younger, Sir Joe didn't allow pokies in pubs, and people used to drive over the border to have a go on the pokies on a Sunday. And Queensland pubs, people used to talk to each other, which is a bit unusual nowadays. But another thing I believe in, that's our infrastructure bank, real building, real assets with real Australians, because nothing will stop you from wasting your money than having earned it yourself in the first place. If the money's put in your pocket, you won't miss it if it goes out. And it's like a self-licking ice cream, if you like. The government get the $5.8 billion, they give it to the people put it through the pokey, the government take it back, and it self-generates. But if we keep voting for the two majors, it's not going to change.
Greetings and best wishes to all the federal election candidates. I'm Jude Simeon, chairperson of HOMINA, the human rights organization for the Middle East and North Africa, and the executive director of Philoy Global. HOMINA is a network formed by the Heads of Churches Conference under the initiative Dealing with Diversity. Since 2012, we have been at the forefront of assisting persecuted religious minorities from regions such as Syria, Iraq, Egypt, Sudan, Eritrea, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and many more. This is our question as a collective Christian community in Australia. Australia has been a champion of human rights and religious freedom. But right now, our immigration system is failing some of the most vulnerable persecuted religious minorities. Christian converts, the Ahmadiyya community, and others fleeing persecution often cannot register with UNHCR or disclose their faith in their host countries. Why? Because doing so could put them in even greater danger. Yet, Australia's humanitarian intake still relies and prioritizes UNHCR referrals, leaving these people with no clear pathway to safety. The current refugee policy does not even mention religious minorities. So my question is this: how will you ensure that persecuted religious minorities, those who cannot safely register with UNHCR, receive fair consideration in the Australia's humanitarian intake and resettlement program?
All right, Lance, you're up first.
Australia must retain control of who and how people enter our magnificent country. Those persecuted religious minorities who cannot safely register with the UN should be given access directly to Australian immigration for their case to be assessed without the involvement of the UN. Many countries have their own established procedures for determining refugee status and providing protection to those who flee persecution. This is a realistic option, as funding for the UNHCR receives in the order of a core funding of $25 million a year, additional funding for specific humanitarian responses of $31 million. An additional $23.7 million was raised by private donors to the UNHCR. A total of $670 million was donated by Australia for the humanitarian sector. This proves Australians' commitment to help this cause. Nobody wants to see this kind of suffering, but utilising the UN as our conduit to get people in here opens us to the agenda of the UN, and we need to separate ourselves from that. Australia needs to take back control of who arrives, how they arrive, and under what circumstances.
Malcolm.
The question is, how will you ensure that persecuted religious minorities, those who cannot safely register with UNHCR, Human High Commission for Refugees, receive fair treatment, fair consideration in Australia's humanitarian intake and resettlement program? My answer is, I will continue to put Australians first. That's it. I'll continue speaking out, championing human rights. I have done so in the Senate. I have moved to introduce a child labour bill to prevent products manufactured with child labour in Africa, China and Asia from entering this country. I have supported Falun Gong, that the Chinese Communist Party persecutes. I've done so publicly and in the Senate. We need to care for people at home. Immigration is out of control. Housing suffering, homelessness suffering. And Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton just give us vague promises about cutting immigration after 4 years of our relentless pressure. The cost of living impact is huge. We will continue to receive people soliciting on behalf of persecuted religious minorities. Bypass the UN. We don't need to go through the UN. Just get control of our immigration, something Pauline Hanson has long been saying. So I've got another question. When will Christian churches stand up for the most persecuted religious minority? You know what it is? Christians. Christians in Muslim countries, will they stand up there? One nation will not accept migrants with a religion which teaches hatred towards Christianity or Western values. And there are some religions that do that. They want to kill us. anyone else, no matter their skin, race, skin colour or race, can expect to be dealt with fairly and equally. One Nation will maintain a humanitarian intake as any advanced country should. The number is to be decided, most likely 5,000 places per annum, down from 20,000 now, until the housing crisis is sorted. It is a housing catastrophe. We are in the richest, potentially the richest state in the world, yet we've got homeless people and they're employed. Until the housing crisis is sorted, then we can review. One Nation will direct $2 billion in foreign aid directly to humanitarian crisis areas around the world to help the maximum number of people in the fastest period of time. We have, I didn't mention it, but part of our money saving is to redirect our policy, cutting the aid and redirecting it to areas of need. More than 380 million Christians face high levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith. 380 million. Will mainstream churches stand with them? The World Watch List is Open Doors Institute's annual ranking of the 50 countries where Christians face the most extreme persecution. If you go in there and explore each country profile and download the detailed dossiers for in-depth information about following Jesus in the most dangerous places in the world, then we'll learn more about Christian persecution and discover how to stand with our brothers and sisters in prayer and action. Mainstream churches have fallen because they're now dependent on government funding. They have fallen. That makes it easier for the pagans like the Greens pushing UN policies. You're at the mercy of the pagans in this country. We need to exit the UN. That was one of the policies that I introduced. And I first raised that in 2016. It's now One Nation policy. Let me just give you a background to that speech. When I got into the Senate, a very wise and elderly person called me and he gave me some advice. He said, don't mention Agenda 21 from the United Nations. I knew why. It's open. Everyone knows about it. But he said, don't mention it. This man never gave advice because he doesn't take advice. Very strong-willed, independent. And I knew why he was doing it because he said he was asking me to not raise it because people would ridicule me. In my first speech, I said we not only need to exit the UN, we need to stop Agenda 21. You cannot run away from the issues. That's something Pauline's refused to do. She will never run away from issues. She doesn't like fighting. I don't like fighting. I get nervous. She gets nervous. We can pick it up in her voice. But there's one thing worse to Pauline and one thing worse to me than fighting, and that's running away from a fight. Our country is literally at stake. Our country is at stake. Look at everything it's going through. You know, we've heard people coming up to me, no matter where I go in Queensland, saying, we love your policies, they're resonating with us, cost of living. And then a mum will say, what about culture? Culture is the most important thing in any entity. It determines the productivity, the safety, the security, the profit and loss. Culture is now, in major corporations and savvy businesses, something that's nurtured and designed. I did it with Gordonstone. That's why we had our record runs there. We designed the culture, and people loved it. When other mines in the area were having 40% turnover, we had 1% turnover. And they targeted our workers because they were so good. Culture is everything. And we are letting our culture rot, thanks to the UN. And the churches are letting it happen. The churches have the key to unlocking our culture and bringing it back, Jesus Christ. His teachings are the answer. But the churches are not pushing it. They're falling for the woke agenda. And so this is a friendly appeal, Greg. It's not to bash you, it's not to bash the churches. I want the church to stand up. It is the key to getting our country back. We'll mix with Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs. I was born and raised and had my formative years in India. I was with Hindus, Sikhs, Muslims, Buddhists, Baha'i, Christians. I mixed with all of them. I played with them as a little child. But we need to stand up for our culture, and it's a Christian culture. We need to restore our family. Family is the bedrock. I mentioned a little while ago the communists went, and this is a communist push. The people who are pushing so many of these issues have openly stated they're doing it to put in place an unelected socialist global governance. Unelected socialist global governance. The head of the climate fraud push in the UN has openly said that she's pushing it not for the environment, not for the climate, but to put in place a new world economic order. That's what it's all about. So Pauline Hanson first raised this in 1996. What happened to her? She was bagged for it. But when the communists want to take over, they destroy religion, they destroy family, they destroy property rights, and then they get everyone to turn to the government. Then you're under control, and then you move that government to Geneva or New York, and that's the end of it. We need to restore family, and we need to get control of our immigration, and we need the churches to stand up. I know recently, about 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a prominent Christian organisation in this country, knowing my strong stance, pro-life stance, anti-abortion stance, and they said, will you work with us on education and getting the churches more attuned to education? I said, I will. Why don't we take it a step further and actually work with the churches to restore our country?
Well, thank you both. Is this still? Yep. So thank you both for sharing what you've shared with us. We've given people a lot to think about as they go to the ballot boxes in the weekend or before. And but yeah, so while I get my computer to wake back up again, I'm going to ask you a question. And first of all, and so you guys you share that mic there. So look, it's, you know, you've been dealing with some pretty heavy questions so far. This one's a little bit lighter, but you know, both of you come from what would traditionally be called centre-right parties, and there's a number of centre-right parties that people could vote for, as well as the Liberal Party, as well as then also the other spectrum of parties towards the Labor, Greens, etc. But what I want to know is, what do you see is unique about your party as opposed to all the other parties? And in particular, the differences between the two of you, the parties there. What are some of the differences? What's unique about your party?
Yeah, for my part of it, there's a lot more the same, I'd say, between Malcolm and myself than what there is different. Fundamentally, I've followed Pauline quite a while. I followed Clive Palmer for a while. Both of them I found far better than the rest. But when I started following Gerard Rennick, I thought, well, I've found somebody who's articulate, intelligent, not saying that you're not, with the answers that resonated with me and backing them up in a manner I could grasp and would work at basic mechanics. So just good, wholesome, honest, very little emotion. For me, that's where I lost my faith probably in Pauline, with the emotion and the stability. I find it in Gerard, and I also lost it with Clive, which direction he was in, still heading to the same place, but not the same direction. So yeah, the People First Party by name, by nature, a new party, Certainly not a party that's asking you to vote for them for the 6th term of their party for Flynn and expecting change. But you shouldn't have change for change's sake either. So you need to change for the better. I believe One Nation or People First would be a positive change, but I think People First would be a better positive change.
Thank you, Lance. It's a good question. I wrote down six words. First one is that One Nation's here to serve. For the first 3 years of my Senate stint, I used to start every speech with, as a servant to the people of Queensland and Australia. When I first mentioned that in my first speech in the Senate, the Greens and the Labor Party laughed and the Liberals sniggered. They don't serve you. I kept repeating it for the first 3 years or so, then I dropped it. The message got through. The second thing, if you watch Pauline and you watch me, you'll find that when we're in a public gathering, we listen. Representative democracy is not about imposing ideas on people, it's about listening to represent those ideas and those people in Parliament. We can't have 28 million people voting on each bill or on each aspect of each decision, each policy, but we can have your representation. We can represent you. So we listen to understand, and then we base our policies on needs. A lot of people are saying, we don't copy anyone. A lot of people are saying, gee, your policies, some of them sound like Trump. That's because Trump is listening to these American people, and they're sick and tired of the woke rubbish that's going on, and we are too as Australians. So Australians are telling Pauline and me the same things that they're telling Donald Trump. That's why they're so similar. The next thing is, we do things in the national interest. Pauline doesn't have a fancy political philosophy. She just says, is it in the national interest? Yes, do it. But she also insists on something that I also insist on, and it's very rare, and that is we make our decisions based on data, hard data. And what you'll find is that a successful business will always be basing their decisions on hard data. I'm here to tell you, that does not happen in the Liberal and Labor parties. It does not happen in the bureaucracy. It does not happen in the Parliament. They contradict the data more often than they support the data. They haven't got a clue nor an interest in what the data is. When you shove it in front of their face, they run away from it. They bury it. They call you names. We're basically a patriotic party. Now, I refer to some of Lance's comments about Pauline. She has been so heavily misrepresented in the media. But people, why did they try to jail her? And let's face it, John Howard colluded with Peter Beattie. Howard government colluded with the Beattie government in Queensland. The Labor government colluded with the Liberal government to knock her off. They tried to jail her. Beattie, from what reports say, enacted legislation to make it possible to jail her retrospectively. That's what happened. And then when she won it on appeal and was released, what did they do? They called her a racist. How can you get racism from a term like One Nation? It doesn't say black nation and white nation, Yugoslav nation and Chinese nation. It says One Nation. She is the last person to be called racist. She will say whatever she wants, whatever she thinks. But I'll give you a story about when I first was elected as a senator. I was walking this is before I went down to Canberra, I was walking towards head office in Albion at the time, and 3 Aboriginal people came towards me in the car park. And they said, where do we find this Pauline Hanson? I said, she'll be here in about half an hour. Come inside, have a seat, have a cuppa, and just wait for her. I said, where are you from? They said, Northern Territory. I said, what are you doing down here? They said, she's the only one who gets it. So what they've done is they've tried to ambush her, tried to suppress her, because the worst thing you can call an Australian woman is racist. It blackballs them, it shuts people up, they won't talk about One Nation. But now, if you look at us in the polls, we're rising because people are realising she's been saying the same things, the same basics for 28 years, and now they're realising She was right. That's what's so powerful about One Nation.
All right, so if we can just keep our answers as short as we can and direct to these ones, just so try and answer the question just as it is, so we can get through as many as we can. Is that okay for these? So some of these, and the ones which people have given a bit of a thumbs up to, they're kind of questions that you have sort of been touching on. So if you want to answer just specifically to what's different to maybe what you might want to answer to what you've already said, don't you just say, see my previous answer if you think that pretty much covers it. But because I think lower down I've got some good questions which you haven't touched on yet. And I'd like to get to some of those. So the first one is, and I'm going to make this general to both of you. It's directed to you, Senator Roberts, but I'm going to make it both of you. So do you think you and, say, Pauline Hanson and Gerard Rennick have the ability to make a real difference and could continue to do so?
The answer is definitely yes. I've given up certainly my retirement to chase this and support Senator Rennick. My hope is to have both the gentlemen, Malcolm and Senator Rennick, in the Senate. I'm going for the House of Reps, and the One Nation opponent going for the House of Reps is not here. So yes, we can make a difference. How we make a difference is get good people in the Senate at Senate estimates and questions and that kind of stuff, and ultimately get the balance of power for what I personally hope to be a united party of miners that have the balance of power over those big two that have allowed all this rot to go on for 40 years.
Yes, this is an easy answer. We can make a difference. We have been making a difference. We lead the agenda in so many areas just by raising them and having the courage to get the data and raise them. We're already doing it.
Awesome. Okay, when you represent this region in Canberra, what is your Christian, or what are the Christian worldview do you take, and how do you intend to vote to protect the vulnerable? So there's kind of two parts to that. The part is your Christian worldview. What is your, I guess, the worldview you're taking that you'll use to vote, and then also how will you use your voice and your vote in Parliament to protect the vulnerable? There's two parts to the question.
Certainly I uphold Christian values. They're 10 of the best rules you can have. The 10 Commandments, if everyone lived by them, everything would be sweet. We wouldn't be in the situation we're in. So that's what I will uphold. As far as people, the vulnerable, there's so many different areas of vulnerability, it's hard to answer such a specific method, but a rich country looks after its people better than a poor country. So let's stop being a poor country by choice, look after our own people and our own reserves, develop them, value-adding products. We mentioned before, sorry I'm going on a bit, about the smelting in Australia. Does anyone know what Comalco stood for? It was Commonwealth Aluminium Company. It was owned by us. And the Far North Queensland development was done as part of a federal program to develop Cape York into the new Singapore. And we sold it off, we sold it out from underneath ourselves. So it's been happening for a while. So rich country, look after the vulnerable.
I am enormously pro-human. Enormously pro-human. I'm very, very proud to be a human being. What we've seen, and people may startle at that, as Brendan just did, but I'm saying it because we are living in anti-human times. Our species is being maligned as greedy, rapacious, uncaring, unkind, irresponsible. We're not. We are not. We're caring. And every single person in this room is evidence that someone's cared for them. We went through an enormously vulnerable period for the first 3 years. We survived that. otherwise we wouldn't be here if someone hadn't cared for us. What we have got is enormous potential as a society. We've got language, we've got working together, we've got the ability to work together, creativity. What we need to do is rip off the central government that is a parasite thwarting our country and make this country the richest in the world. California is, I think, about a quarter of our area, Queensland. They are the 6th wealthiest. If they were a country, they'd be the 6th wealthiest country in the world. We can outshine them easily, but we just have to let Canberra get out of our lives. That's what we have to do. So how to protect the vulnerable? Make them invulnerable by lifting up everyone in our society.
All right, so I've got 2 here around coal. So first is how will you support coal in Canberra? So how will you support the coal industry? But also we've got one specifically around the use of PCI coal technology. I don't know what that is, but if
Powdered coal.
is that what that?
It's like a blast instead of diesel fuel or gas.
All right, and with the use of PCI coal technology, why can't we have more coal-fired power stations? So around about coal, using of coal.
Okay, where I'm living now, there's a big push against a coal mine just north of Bundaberg, and the people's reasoning is they don't want it in their backyard. Well, the coal mine's always in somebody's backyard. If you want to use a light, then you need to accept there's going to be a coal mine. That particular coal mine is metalliferous, and it'll be going overseas, so I say leave it there, leave it in the ground, we don't need it. PCI, it's pulverised coal injection, so it's like a gas once coal's powdered. The only reason we aren't going for it is because the great southerners don't like the name coal. Coal is fantastic. They talk about batteries. They're building a battery at Miriam Vale. They've destroyed all this beautiful farmland, just steamrolled the neighbours, steamrolled the locals. The battery is 11 hectares. 11 hectares, all imported from overseas, and it lasts 4 hours from fully charged to empty. Yeah, and it costs borrowed money from overseas to pay companies from overseas to dump it on our place instead of our coal that we've got under the ground. You want a good battery? We've got a 300 million year old battery under the ground here. When we want it, dig it up and use it.
Thank you. Have a look around. See if you can find anything in this room, in the town of Emerald, in the city of Brisbane, that has not been touched by coal. You won't. Most things were made with steel implements. Steel is made by coal and iron ore. Coal is in everything. There is a reason why the Indians, well, let's go to the Paris Agreement. It was signed in 2015 by the Liberal Party. It was first signed by Tony Abbott. It was next ratified by Malcolm Turnbull. The Paris Agreement is not an agreement at all. At the Copenhagen Conference of Parties that the UN had prior to that, about 2012, Kevin Rudd flew over there with 104 people in his delegation, including a hairdresser. And the Conference of Parties ended with a complete mess. All the princes, the presidents, the prime ministers arrived to celebrate the signing of a wonderful agreement for the UN at Copenhagen. Didn't happen because they couldn't get agreement. China, India and others would not sign the agreement. So what they did at Paris in 2015 was they said, okay, we'll get all the princes, the prime ministers and the presidents to come at the start, and then whatever happens at the end, we'll quietly pretend that we agreed to it. That's exactly what happened. China said, no, we're not signing our death knell. We will develop our country, and then in 2050, we'll think about it. India said much the same. Asian countries said much the same. Australia said, we'll decimate our country, gut our economy, commit to economic suicide, and we'll legislate to do so. Not an agreement that the world signed up for. We are mugs. There's a reason why the Chinese, the Indians, the Asians, the Africans want coal. It's the cheapest source of power. And if you have the cheapest source of power, you have a competitive advantage in everything you do, especially in manufacturing. So they watched the West develop our society, develop our civilization, human progress in the last 170 years because of one thing, hydrocarbon fuels, coal, oil and natural gas. And they want that. So China makes wind turbines using our coal and their own coal, solar panels, ship them here, we subsidise them to ship them here, we subsidise them to install them, we subsidise them to run them. All of those subsidies are paid by you and me, and then that drives up the price of electricity, which now is the highest cost component in manufacturing. It's not labour anymore, it's electricity. So we drive our manufacturing up through the roof, costs through the roof, which sends our manufacturing to China. So China gets our subsidies, gets our coal, makes products and ships it overseas, and they get our manufacturing industries and manufacturing jobs. And what about our defence? People are talking about China as a threat. If we've got no manufacturing capacity, what have we got? Nothing. Thank you, ma'am. I mean, the Chinese are not doing this in a premeditated way. They're just reaping the rewards of stupidity in our country. So yes, coal.
Yes, we agree.
But you can hold it, Mike. I don't need it over here. All right. So the next one is: to what extent do you believe our nation has a duty towards refugees?
Australia has a duty. We're part of the global unit. We're Christian, we're loving people, but we cannot sink the lifeboat. Australia is our lifeboat, and we cannot sink it by taking on too many, no matter what the situation. We must look after ours first. We can't have homeless. I was shocked the other day to see a tent city in our botanical gardens here in Emerald. I hadn't seen that before, and these are good working people. I'm sorry, but we don't have space or resources the way the country is currently run. If we do have opportunity, like my brother lives at Aramac, massive areas of land. I know for a fact, it's a personal thing of mine, South African farmers could do very well there, and yet we don't import them despite the fact that they're being murdered in their homes, excuse me, and the cattle run off and they lose everything. We import people that are dependent, and that isn't looking after refugees.
Australia first, Australians first. We have got to be very careful about the number of people we let into this country under any status, refugee or otherwise. We've got to be just as careful about the type of people we let into this country. So the people sleeping in tents in the botanical gardens in this town, which is in a wealthy area of the country, that's an absolute disgrace on us. And we have been in a recession, a per capita recession, for the last 7 quarters. If it was a recession total, negative growth, for 2 quarters, that would be a recession. Sorry, I should say that again. Negative growth for 2 quarters, that would be a recession. We have been in a negative per person, per capita growth for 7 quarters. The only thing stopping us from being labelled a recession is the numbers of migrants being brought in, bumping up the GDP, inflating it. And the people in the botanical gardens are paying the price for Anthony Albanese and Scott Morrison covering up this disgrace.
All right. So what are you going to do to encourage rural training, apprenticeships, education, university, people essential for, so people doing those training that is essential for Australian prosperity. So how would you encourage that training for rural people?
A total reversal of what the Queensland government's been doing for 10 years probably, complaining that the rural sector is emitting too much gas and too much erosion, and yet closing all of the colleges, tearing up the railway lines so all the trucks have to run on the roads that aren't any damn good. All of these things, stopping birthing centres in rural hospitals. It's a deliberate and constant drain of rural areas, rural people, teachers, leaving us isolated and therefore vulnerable. What would I do about it? I'd champion the bush. I hate the city. I hate the concrete pillars and people live in them. They can't have eaves on their house. They have the air conditioner and the lights running 24 hours a day, and they blame a coal miner for carbon. It's just absurd. I think the other day in Queensland at night time, our energy bill, energy made was zero by solar, being night time, but 1% from wind, because there was no wind over Queensland. So 99% was by coal. Coal comes from rural areas. Rural areas need their money spent back on them, on their roads, on their hospitals, on their schools, on their programs. Farmers need to be able to farm. They need to be able to clear their land. They need to be able to farm it. It's generational farming. They want to pass it on, and they're going to pass it on as best they can. Give them guidance, but don't give them restrictions from people out of university who don't really know farming.
So, training. Yeah. So training for people in rural areas. That's where we're focusing here. Yep.
The answer is the same. Unshackle the farmers and let them get on with the job. They will provide the training. They will get the training to the people. The bureaucrats in Canberra, the bureaucrats in West End and Brisbane have not got a clue what they're doing. John Howard started the war on farming. John Howard had said that he would not sign the UN Kyoto Protocol to comply with their climate claims, but he would enforce it. He would implement it. He said that. Now, he had a problem, because to shut down power stations, cars, farms, power stations would not be accepted by the people back in 2005, 2006. So what his government did was they went to the UN and got agreement that if they stopped the clearing of trees that absorb carbon dioxide, they could take that as a credit instead. He had a problem. Section 51, Clause 31 of the Constitution says if you interfere with the property rights of an Australian, you must pay just terms compensation. It would have cost him hundreds of billions of dollars. So what the Howard government did was they went to Borbidge in 1996, 97 and did a deal. And then they went to Carr in New South Wales and did a deal so that they would stop the clearing of land. When a farmer or anyone, a householder, buys land, they have the right to do whatever they want with it. That is what they bought it for. That's what their property rights ensure. And the Howard government came in through and then in 1998 it was Beattie government. Beattie government has correspondence in the Hansard in Queensland State Parliament saying that he did the deal with Howard for enabling Howard to comply with the UN Kyoto Protocol. So that stopped farmers clearing land, stopped their property rights. Since then, we've seen the Labor government under Beattie, under Bligh, under Palaszczuk, not rescinded by Newman. I thought well of Campbell, but he didn't rescind this. All of these have put in more and more controls on farmers' rights to use their property. What is the number one asset of a farmer? The soil. They don't want it to erode. If they're farming with bad practices and it erodes, someone tells them they'll stop it. Labor government is telling them how they can farm. The cost of fertilisers, the cost of pesticides is high. Farmers don't want to waste it. There is no evidence whatsoever that it's affecting the Barrier Reef. They can't even track it on the Barrier Reef. And yet that's the excuse that's being used. The Barrier Reef's being used for climate as well. There's no evidence that it's being affected at all. So what they're doing is they're controlling the farmers' rights to use their land. So basically, bureaucrats in West End, bureaucrats in Canberra are telling farmers what to do. The best person, what does a farmer do when he retires? Hands his land over to the kids, or sells it and retires to the coast, correct? Their superannuation is their farm. The productivity of the farm depends upon a healthy environment. If they decimate the environment, the farm is wrecked. It's in the farmer's interest, it's in the state's interest to let the farmers farm and pull off all these controls that are over them, that are just restricting property rights. You get the farmers unshackled, and then the rest will come. They will hire people, they will train people, they will make good returns, and they'll be more productive. That's all that's needed. That's the training. I'm not going to tell you and prescribe training, although Pauline Hanson has got the first apprenticeship scheme up back in 2016. But the farmers are the best ones to tell you that. Just give them the opportunity.
Alrighty. So, I mean, I think I can answer this one for the two of you. It says, what are your views on freedom of speech for Christians? And I presume we should have freedom of speech. And do you need to add anything more? You've both spoken on this.
It just must be absolute. It can't be offend somebody or possible or how somebody else feels. It's your right to have freedom of speech and joined with respect.
Yeah, we've said it all. Freedom of speech. But there are several freedoms. There's freedom of life, freedom to live, freedom of faith, freedom of belief, freedom of thought, freedom of exchange, freedom of interaction, freedom of movement, freedom of speech. None of those apply if there's not a freedom to live. The freedom to live, the right to live, is fundamental. Then comes freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is fundamental as well, though.
Alrighty, so there's two on guns here, firearms. Where's the second one here? Okay, and there's kind of, I guess, is that the third one? Anyway, so the first one was back here, and I'll try and just group them all together. So what's your view on firearm legislation with reference to the current changes to the WA firearm legislation? I don't know what that is, but I'm guessing there's a change to...
Significant change.
Significant change to is that Western Australia firearm? Or is this some other, is this a national policy?
It's Western Australian so far.
Okay.
But
probably looking at going further. I actually have heard of that. Okay. Yep. And so we've got that one. So, and then we've also got on firearms. We've got, what are your views on the Castle Law? So the right to defend home and property. And is it the second one? Okay, no, they're the two. So the changes to the laws and then Castle Doctrine. What are your views on those?
First of all, I defend the right to have arms. I'm wearing a SSAA belt buckle at the moment. I'm an active member of the Sporting Shooters Association. I've donated my time for feral animal control and that kind of stuff. I keep my guns locked away. I do it right, I do it safely. The WA legislation is complete government overreach because the Labor Party got in there with such a huge amount of votes. They took that as a mandate to go ahead with their own agenda. So they're limiting more limits than what John Howard and others have already brought in on the kind of firearms, the amount, size of magazines, and also the justification for firearms. You're being forced to say, I need a 30-30 because I'm going to shoot pigs at close range, rather than I'd like using a 30-30. You know? And that there's evidence that is already underway here in Queensland. A lot of people have contacted me from the Shooters Union and the SSAA with the same concerns. They're being asked the same questions as WA, and also they're no longer allowed to buy a Creedmoor 6.5, for instance, in Queensland, even though our legislation hasn't changed at all. But the previous Labor government had obviously enacted with their bureaucrats to push this through, and they're still pushing on no matter who's in power. So firearm ownership is under attack, and I defend firearm ownership. Oh, and
Castle doctrine.
Castle doctrine. You should have the right to defend your family, man. If you can't defend your home and your family, then what is there? You need to be able to feed your family, defend the family, and look after your family. Like, there's no greater honour than having your family safely and securely in your house and being fed from your labour.
So just remember, try and keep our answers short.
I don't know the details of the Western Australian changes. I know that some changes are being made in Queensland without changing the law. It's illegal. The police are just enforcing another standard. So that's wrong. If we look in America, we see 50 states, and that gives us a huge range, and even counties have laws on guns, I think. It gives us a huge range from carry a weapon in public to not being able to carry a weapon in public. With such a large number of data points, it's very, very clear that the states with the most severe gun laws have the most severe gun crimes. The states with the lowest severity or lowest control of guns have the least gun crime. Shooters tend to be highly responsible people. That's a fact in this country. That's the first one. So I support firearms, the right to own firearms. And the Castle law, I was talking with the person who was about to become homeless just last week. He said the shame, the mental health issues, because he couldn't protect his family with a house, it's just almost unbearable. You need to give men the ability, and women, the ability to protect their family and to protect themselves, to protect their children. That's fundamental. That is, as Lance said, the main priority of a breadwinner, to provide the food, to provide the shelter, to provide the house, to provide the security. And people who can't do it don't feel too good about being a man. Yep.
And quickly, do you support nuclear energy, the use of nuclear energy?
I support the concept. We don't need it. Maybe later, but certainly not in my lifetime.
Yes, I do. I'll use Peter Dutton's announcement of his policy to make a difference with the Labor Party, because they're both pushing high solar and wind, both of them. Liberal policy is almost identical to Labor policies right across the board: immigration, cost of living, everything, housing. When Peter Dutton said, let's consider nuclear, we said, great, at last. We've been talking about this for years. Fantastic. But why would you throw coal under the bus? Why would you justify nuclear on the basis that we've got to stop producing carbon dioxide? He just increased the pressure against our most efficient form of energy generation. He threw coal under the bus. Stupid thing to do. The third thing is we must choose our energy based on the lowest cost of generation. And that is undoubtedly coal, except in Hells Gate and Tully Millstream Falls where it's hydro. But apart from that, it's coal everywhere. Where it works out to be cheaper, fine, use nuclear. But we must get back to using the cheapest, reliable baseload source of power.
Okay. How do you, okay, there might be a bit more context that's needed for this question, but how do you deal with the two-party preferred voting at the polls? So I'm not exactly sure what angle they're going for in that question, but I guess how do you deal with the fact that people do end up going to one of the major, but I don't know if there's something else. If someone wrote that question wants to give a bit more context. Yeah, okay, so we spoke about this. Okay, so I thought it might have been coming from you, just wanted to make sure. So yeah, so there's been an experience in polling booths that when there is not a clear winner for first preferences, that in polling booths they just go to Labor and Liberal and they don't care about the preferences, about shifting the preferences, shifting the preferences. They just go, no, it's two-party.
I was told that happened last time in this electorate. In Flynn. I was on a booth 3 years ago. I do hope it doesn't take place because I'm new to this. Malcolm will have to answer it properly. I'm learning a lot, and I'm learning it's pretty nasty how it goes. I put out my preferences and then somebody puts out theirs, but they've changed them from what they said they were going to do on account of my preferences. And now in this electorate, the Labor Party has actually put Colin Boyce above me in the preferences, which I'm not clever enough to figure out just why, but I think it wasn't good.
Okay, with your explanation, Greg, I think I understand the issue. We get asked this question a lot. On the day of the election, you've got the media watching like hawks. They want to pump things up and make it emotional and all the rest of it and get a result quickly. So what happens is they allocate the votes into piles according to all 8, 9 parties, whatever's in your electorate, and they allocate them. And then they open an envelope. And the envelope will give the returning officer the names of the 2 parties who were preferred last time. It may be Liberal and Labor. It may be Liberal and Katters. It may be Labor and Katters. So this is what happened in Lockyer when I was scrutineering. Pauline Hanson ran in the state electorate of Lockyer. She clearly had the second highest pile behind the Liberals. Clearly. Katters was tiny. But the previous election, she didn't run. The Katters came second. So they just used that. Then they allocate the preferences to Katters and to Liberals for one reason only, and that's to give the media some idea of what's happening overall for Lockyer so they can declare a winner or a loser. That's all it's for. Come Sunday, they put them all back in the box, they stack them up into their piles, and then they go through it and do it properly. All right, so that's the 2-party preferred from the previous election. That's what will usually happen. But there'll always be a 2-party preferred when you're using preferences, because you've got to end up with 2 parties after all the preferences are distributed. So I think preferences are a marvellous way of doing things. The key thing to remember is no matter what this fellow says, no matter what this fellow says, no matter what our parties say, you own your preferences, you put them wherever you want. They're there for you to show who you prefer. End of story. And it's the most fair system there is because it gives minor parties a greater chance, because if the minor parties recommend to their voters, you can't preference. If the minor parties recommend to their voters to put the other minor parties high up in the preferences, then you've got the best chance of getting a minor party in. Preferences are the way to get minor parties in.
And you might need to clarify something here as well. I'm guessing there's an angle here. So it just the question says the current government is not constitutional. Clearly, would say that can't be true. But the next part of the question might give us some clue as to what the person's trying to get at. Because how can we stop corporate takeover of Australia? So maybe what they're referring to is yep, sure. Okay.
It's a corporation. How can we change that? How can we get back to being where legal people like taking money?
We are not a corporation. We have an ABN number because we engage in contracts. Same with the states, same with the state departments, the federal departments, same with the local councils. They have ABN numbers, but they're not corporations. They use that so they can trade, buy and sell stuff. That's all that's for. I think it's called the Titles Act. I can't remember the year it was. They can change the titles, they can change the letterheads at will, so long as they just do it as a government. It's not part of the Constitution that we're called the Commonwealth of Australia. That's what it was proclaimed as, but that's not a requirement to go on our dollar bills or our letterheads. The government of the day can change that. There's a lot of nonsense running around about the Constitution having been changed illegally. It hasn't. If you go to the original Constitution, which was passed as a British Act of Parliament for Australia because we were colonies, and you take the 8 amendments to the Constitution that have passed, and you add them, you'll find exactly the same Constitution. It's just an internet nonsense, an internet lie, it's an internet fabrication. We've checked it out. I've got a barrister in my office, and he's gone right through it. But there is another little thing to it. That doesn't mean that even though the Constitution's intact, doesn't mean that they comply with the Constitution. You look at the COVID mismanagement. You look at the formation of national law. You look at the National Cabinet. That's all rubbish. That was Scott Morrison and the states working together. So what Pauline and I have to do is continue to bring them back to comply with the Constitution. Otherwise they abuse it. But that's a really important question you asked, Mark, because very few people will know the answer to this question. Which is the only country in the world in which the people voted for the Constitution before it was implemented? This one. Who are the only people that can change the Constitution? The citizens, the voters. Who are the people that elect the government? The people. So who's in charge? We are. We're supposed to be. So, we are not a monarchy, we're a constitutional monarchy, and there's a huge difference. We're closer to being a republic than a monarchy. In a monarchy, the king or queen rule. They tell you what to do, they make the laws. In a constitutional monarchy, the king or queen have reserve powers, the Governor-General has reserve powers. When things go awry, they bring in those powers to, just like Whitlam after Curtis missed him. That was well done. So the top of our governance structure is not a king or queen. The top of our governance structure is the Constitution, and that is what serves the people. That's very, very important to understand. The main reason why our country is deteriorating is because most of the people are asleep and have turned a blind eye to Liberal and Labor playing tag team. Your turn, mate, my turn, your turn, my turn. That's what's going on. They're not looking after the best interests of the country. They're working to the globalist tune. Only some of them, most of the Liberal Party and most of the Labor Party people in Parliament, have not got a clue what I just said, and they don't care to find out. But that's what's going on. They're destroying our country from within, and it's because the people are asleep. Democracy is a wonderful thing, but if it's passive democracy and people just think the government's working for them, then it becomes apathy, that becomes tyranny, and they're running over the top of it. COVID showed that abundantly. The lies they tell in Parliament about climate, there's no evidence for climate fraud. There is evidence of climate fraud, there's no evidence for climate change going on. None at all. I could talk for half an hour on that. I won't, Greg. But the thing is, the people are in charge of this country, but they're not being in charge of this country. We have got to get back to an active democracy. So I want to congratulate you, Greg, because this is active democracy, holding candidates accountable, holding an elected member of Parliament accountable. That's what we love, Pauline and I.
Alrighty, come back to that one because I don't think there's actually an answer that you can possibly give. Anyway, we'll come back to it maybe. Now, so apparently, will one nation remove local government? Yes or no? No. It says that. Will one nation remove local government?
It's not local government. There are two levels of government in this country. Referendum, I think we've had 3 referendums on this, and it's been resolved by the people that state and federal are the levels of government. Local councils work under state government rules and regulations. So no, we won't be removing local government. What we would like to remove is many, many layers of federal government. We've already talked about the $90 billion of waste that we want and duplication that we want to remove. That's a good start. Our Constitution lays out that most services are to be done by the states, and it's called competitive federalism. If New South Wales does a better job of running their power stations, then Queenslanders will move to New South Wales because the power will be cheaper. Businesses will move, investment will move. Joh Bjelke-Petersen did this used competitive federalism by abolishing state duty, death duty. And what happened? People moved to Queensland to die. Yeah, because they'd leave their kids more money by setting up a place on the Gold Coast. So what did the other states do? Abolished it. What does Labor want to do now? Bring it back as a central federal government thing. When you've got the government, central government taking control of it, there's no competition, there's no accountability. So we need to give the states back their powers. Same thing as that, we pinched that competitive federalism from the states. In America, the federal government has taken over more and more of the states, and we've done the same here. We've just neutered them. That's why health, education, housing, send it back to the states. That's one of the cornerstones for us saving money. And when you send it back to the states and the federal government's not there, you get accountability because you've got competition between the states. It's a marketplace in governance. It's absolutely brilliant idea.
All right, yeah.
Can I just quickly on local, state, federal?
Yes.
I can't ever remember being asked when I asked local governments to go hunting down whether or not you've got a Form 15 for your house. I asked them to fix the roads and pick up the rubbish. I didn't ask them to put rainbow-coloured intersections in or flags and things like that. I asked them to fix the roads and pick up the rubbish. By you voting, local, state and federal, the power's in your hands to bring politicians back to heel and do your bidding, not the other way around.
In addition, it's not every 3 years or 4 years that we do that as citizens. It's holding them accountable between elections, writing to them, visiting their offices, telephoning them, and persisting.
All right. So on a similar-ish vein-ish, do you support the establishment of a separate state for North Queensland?
This is probably not a party policy, but yeah, if we could cut off across from Gympie to about Bow Desert, give that back to New South Wales, I think the rest of us would be pretty good.
No, I do not, because if you look at the population distribution, I think there are three federal seats in the lower house, the House of Reps, that would be covered by North Queensland. You could argue it's 4 or 5. It depends where you draw the line. Even if you drew a line at 4 or 5, that's a small amount of power in federal out of 151 seats. I think anyway, North Queensland would be far worse off. The best thing to do is to fix up the current mess and get an upper house back in Queensland.
That could be good. What are your thoughts on cutting down on FIFO in our mines to promote people moving to mining towns and therefore building our infrastructure? So FIFO versus local living.
Yep, I've spent half my life doing FIFO. I know I'd say it's shortened my life and certainly affected my family badly. It's a decision I made. Emerald was built on a non-FIFO structure and it was very, very successful. The Gordonstone days really split that apart. There's benefits in both ways. I think it should be 50-50. There should be a cap on it. By being 50-50, when there's a downturn, it doesn't impact just that community. The impact's lost a lot into other communities. Likewise with an upturn. You don't get billion-dollar houses because half your population is living in another area. So I think 50-50.
All right. So again, even
Do you want
short.
an answer on that?
Yes.
I'm opposed to putting in regulations to force people to live in certain places, to stop companies hiring people from certain places, totally opposed to that. What we need to do is stop the war on the bush and rebuild the regions and make it more attractive for people to live here. Emerald was fine. It only had half the population you've got now. When Christine and I moved here, and she moved from a city of 7 million in Chicago. We loved the joint. So Emerald's a great town because it's got a lot of people from many, many sectors. Agriculture, mining, government, transport services. It's a hub. So that's what we've got to do with the rest of the bush and the rest of the mining region. Just make it more attractive to live out there.
So there's some important issues here. So we've got youth crime, so increasing violence within our schools. So any ideas on that?
We need to bring back discipline, and parents need to own that discipline from the start. We talk about government ineptness, if you like, and we're encouraged to turn over the raising our children from 2 years old to the government, whether it be through childcare, daycare, after school, that kind of thing. We need to re-own it, and we need to bring back discipline.
Families are the key. Youth crime is a very complicated and yet inherently simple overall thing. The most passionate, switched on people on the planet, altruistic people on the planet, are the adolescent male. If they have purpose, they're world beaters. What we're seeing youth crime is a reflection on the deterioration of the family, the breakdown of the churches in terms of their message. We also see a lack of meaning and purpose. And we are told almost every week that the world is going to boil in another 5 years. What's the point? If you're a 15-year-old, what the hell, I won't be around when I'm 20. So I might as well go and steal a car and have some fun. And the youth crime is not a racially based crime. It's not a regionally based crime. Sure, there's youth crime in Cairns, Townsville, Mackay, Rocky, Gladstone. It's also on the Gold Coast, where they're all white and some of them are very wealthy. They're doing it for larks. There's no meaning, there's no purpose. So it's a multifaceted. We've got to stop bureaucrats and politicians in Canberra lying about climate, for example, lying about so many other things. They use fear and separation and guilt right across the whole society for so many things. You saw it in COVID. You see it in climate. It's all rubbish. So we've got to give the people, kids, some meaning and purpose, and that'll take too long to answer at the moment.
Yep. All right, so a very short answer on this one, because I think you probably made your beliefs pretty clear on this throughout what you've been saying. So your belief on conscientious objectors in healthcare based on moral religious beliefs.
Okay, so objecting to...
So being a conscientious objector to certain health care. So based on your religious and moral beliefs, I was looking at abortion, euthanasia.
Right, I gotcha. Yep. Yeah, certainly you should be able to conscientiously object and have no negative effect on your role or your job. The Palestinian nurse and doctor who said they wanted to kill Jewish patients. It would be far better if they conscientiously objected to treating them than to do what they were going to do.
Yes, and it applies to doctors, it applies to nurses. They can opt out of doing something if they don't want to. It applies to patients. Informed consent is essential. These basic rights, what One Nation is fighting for, they were all stolen during the COVID fraud, the COVID mismanagement. They need to be restored. It's fundamental that I don't stick anything in your body, Greg, without your consent.
And what about mental health? How are you going to support people who struggle with mental health? So access to funding, or what sort of funding?
Mental health's a huge issue and getting greater because we wake up in the morning with anxiety. The phone's buzzing, the messages are coming through. We turn on the TV, we're filled with anxiety. It's all day, every day. Of course, we're suffering. We're told during COVID, get inside, shut the windows, don't exercise. Mental health is a weapon being used against humanity, and we've got to fight back by things like this, church-based organisations, I think a lot. I think we have to bring back a safe place for people to go. There's no use saying, oh, we'll just rehabilitate them to the community and then they end up living under a bridge, suffering with self-harm. So we need good, they were very quick to build buildings if you didn't have a jab to keep a few thousand people in. I think we can build some pretty good treatment centres with similar money.
That's a very complex thing, so I'm not going to answer that briefly. It is a societal thing, it's a government thing. We look at housing, we look at immigration, we look at climate fear, you look at climate fraud, COVID fraud. The federal government and the state governments are complicit in causing a lot of anxiety in people. When those people living in the botanical gardens in Emerald, they'd be under mental health stress.
What about actual resources for people who are not just the cause of addressing some of those causes, but people who have a mental illness, who need access to healthcare? What sort of resources might you be looking at to bear for those people?
Where does it end? Drugs, alcohol, gambling, family breakdown, loss of jobs. The federal government policies are destroying this country. And I'm not just talking about the current government, I'm talking about over the last 7 decades, particularly since the formation of the UN in 1944, has driven a lot of this. That's where we've got to stop. We've got to get the government out of people's life, just let them be free and get on with life. So it's hard to answer your question in the specifics in a short period. Okay. It is a problem, but I think we need to recognise the fact that government causes a lot of it.
Very quickly, I was an assessor to get Trainee of the Year in Darwin, and this one guy was very tall, very dark. He had walked across Africa twice by the time he was 12 years old and spent his whole life in Sudan and places like that. And I talked to him about suicide and mental health, and he said, where I come from, life is sacred, your own life. Staying alive is the most important thing. He was worried about being chased by a lion. He was going to stay alive. Here we have everything fed to us and we can't manage to stay alive. There's something fundamentally wrong.
Okay. And the last question is about working together with other minor parties to form government.
It's something that I dream of, to be honest. There's a huge amount of egos to be put aside for that to take place. As you've heard tonight, most of the opinions are pretty aligned, as two people could be. I'd be all for it. Anything I can do to help bring down the duopoly, I would put my hand up for.
Well, I'm going to be controversial here. I'm going to tell you a few stories. You can make up your own minds.
Be very quick with your few
Okay.
stories.
Well, okay, I won't go into the details, but we have been plagued by minor parties telling lies about us because they see us as well in advance of them in terms of voting. We're on the verge of having another 5 senators in federal parliament. We came very close to getting one elected in Western Australia, South Australia, Victoria, and then we were 7th out of 6 in New South Wales and Tassie. What we've had is blatant lies told by a number of minor parties because they want to knock us off. What I'm focused on is knocking off Liberal and Labor, and especially the Greens. And I think the minor parties would be far better off if they focus on them rather than us, because we will work with anyone in the parliament. We've shown that. We'll even work with the Greens when they come up with, on the rare occasion, with good stuff. No, I'm serious. But minor parties are talking through both, some of the minor parties talking through both sides of their mouth. They're shooting at One Nation, and at the same time, they're saying, we've got to all work together. Come on, just be consistent.
All right. Well, thank you to you guys for being here. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for everyone for sticking around for the evening. Thank you for giving detailed answers and expansive answers to really put forward your ideas and beliefs so that people can have an informed choice. And hopefully you all now have a bit more of an understanding of at least these two candidates who've turned up tonight, and maybe they have persuaded you one way or the other, and maybe not, but it doesn't matter either way. It's that we are informed and we're making informed choices. So thank you for turning up. Thank you for asking your questions. And of course, I'm sure they'll stick around for a little while if you've got something else you want to chat about. So thanks to Malcolm and Lance, Malcolm Roberts and Lance Price for being here this evening. Also want to say a special thanks to Freedom for Faith, who helped to organise this as well, as they've been organising these things with churches all across the state and all across the nation, in particular in Queensland. So thank you to the help that they do. Anyway, they do help. That's been good. So thank you. So let's give these guys a big round of applause. Yeah, and we'll keep the doors open for a little while yet if you want to chat to them. All right. Thank you. Thanks. Yes, last question was, can we wrap up? It's like,